And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I am thrilled to be co-hosting today with my friend, fellow author, and fellow mighty blazer, Margaret Pinard, joining me today in the hot seat as we're going to grill up real good Michael Sims, the author of 7 nonfiction books and 8 anthologies. Most recently, Michael is the author of Arthur and Sherlock, Conan Doyle, and the Creation of Holmes, which was a finalist for almost every award in crime nonfiction, in English, from the Edgar in the U.S. to the Silver Dagger from the Crime Writers Association in Great Britain, and many, many others. Michael, congratulations. His book, Adam's Navel, was a New York Times notable book, amazing, and a Library Journal Best Science book. His book, The Story of Charlotte's Web, was chosen as the best book of the year by many venues, including the Washington Post. Amazing. And Michael is primarily a nonfiction writer, but he also edits these anthologies on the side, including the Penguin book of Gaslight Crime, the Penguin book of Victorian Women in Crime, and of course, what we're here to talk about today, the book of Arsène Lupin, The Gentleman Thief, which is taking over Netflix by storm. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very encouraging list. It reminds me of high points. I should just play this once a day when I start writing.
I could call you every day and hype you up. I could be your hype woman.
That would be great. Your energy level is wonderful because I feel like I enter an interview like this and my energy builds up and up and up. And so I'm just glad to see we're all going to be on the same level there.
And I haven't even had my coffee yet today. This is just baseline DiVello. So we're so excited to have you here, Michael. Let's kick it off and talk about your process of editing this book, which is 115 years old. Written by a guy who is 115 years old. Tell us about this process. What was that like?
Mostly fun. And at first, I just might as well point out, I didn't edit it 115 years ago. Although I do have very soft lighting for the risk of that, I had been reading these. I started reading detective stories about when I was 2 years old, it seems like. I mean, they just go back forever. And a bunch of them are up here. Hardy Boys, 3 Investigators, what was the Encyclopedia Brown, all those things. And so I began looking at different detective stories and then crime stories. And as a freelancer, I don't have any, I didn't even go to college. So I've never had anything to fall back on. And so anthologies were a way to begin to establish in a new direction, but also a way to get publishers to pay me to continue my self-education. And so for many years, especially I did 7 books, I think, with Bloomsbury. At least 3 or 4 nonfiction books and an equal number of anthologies. And usually the contract would be a nonfiction book plus an anthology. So I would be reading for the anthology while working on the nonfiction book. And then at the end of the nonfiction book, I wasn't suddenly out of money or out of contracts or anything. I just would go on to finish up the anthology then. And they would usually come out maybe 6 months after the nonfiction book. So it's been a lot of fun.
That is so cool. So I am completely addicted to the Netflix adaptation. I love how Omar Sy, he first of all, he is such a rakish, lovable rogue. I feel like nobody but Omar Sy could play that character that is both infuriating and endearing. And I love how he is so dedicated to these books. We've all been that, I mean, all of us here are readers first and foremost. We've all been that little kid who was sneaking a book in class, or in the case of his character in the Bible, pretending it's the Bible, but really reading the Lupin books. And, and loving that book, A Gift from His Father. I mean, we all have those beloved books that we treasure so much. And so I am just in love with this character and with the stories. And I identify as a little girl who loved books that much. So I just want to pause very briefly and welcome everybody who's watching on Facebook. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you've been here before, you know the drill. And if you're new, here's the drill. Every Tuesday, I give you 2 fabulous mystery and thriller authors, and you get to ask them anything about their writing, about their editing, about their careers. What do you want to ask Michael? Just get the questions going in the comments, because what happens on Mysteries and Thrillers stays in Mysteries and Thrillers. It's kind of like Vegas, but for books. So we can grill Michael up real good. So Gail saying hi. Hi, Gail, top community member there. Welcome back, Gail. Good to have you. Anissa's giving us tons of hearts. Anissa's giving us tons of hearts. Anissa, welcome back. She's saying she loves the Sarah Margaret duo. Anissa, we love you. Laura Rossi saying she loves the series. Laura, me too, girl. So questions are already coming in. Let's get to them. Laura would like to know, what book should we read first if we love the TV series? Great question, Laura. Michael, give us some insight.
Well, it sounds like self-promotion, but the one that will cover the series best and where they seem to be headed next is the one I did with Penguin Classics, which is Arsène Lupin, Gentleman Thief. And it's a sort of best of, because there are 5 collections. And if not that, then go to, and I don't know where you'll find it reprinted, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere. Arsène Lupin, Gentleman Burglar, instead of just Thief, was the title of the first volume, I think. And there are several novels too, but those are, they're manic. I mean, they're just insane. They make Captain Nemo look slow. They make James Bond look like Andy Griffith. I mean, they're manic and they're wonderful and they're very funny. And to me, the best thing about the series, I love the TV series so much, and it's more humane, it's more touching and poignant than the original stories ever were. But the original stories are a lot funnier, because this show is witty, but it's witty more in the production and the timing and the sort of choreography of scenes. And the original stories are very funny, just in dialogue too. It's a very smart-ass kind of series. It has been for 115 years. And so the new Lupin series on French Netflix is just exactly captures the spirit of it. And I like how it differs from what Benedict Cumberbatch did with Sherlock. It's not a different universe in which Sherlock lives in our time or Lupin lives in our time. It's, as you said, it's a character inspired by the original stories. So it's our universe. It's Lupin was 115 years ago. And this guy, as you said, his father shared the stories with him. And then, and I would not recommend this as a form of therapy in the real world, but his father gives him the collection of stories. He grows up and decides to avenge his father's, I don't want to do any spoilers, avenge ill treatment of his father through reenacting some of the Lupin strategies. And only in movies is that a smart idea for how to deal with grief. But it works. It turns out to be fabulous. And it makes you think that stealing diamonds could be a lot better than therapy. And I don't think I've ever seen, to go back to the series, there aren't a lot of actors who could be more charming than Omar Sy. Chadwick Boseman.
Yes.
He could do it. And that's a terrible loss.
Yeah.
I thought we'd be watching him melt screens for 40 years. It's just so gracious and balanced and intelligent and charismatic. And so that's very sad. I sound like Anthony Hopkins at the Oscars.
No, it's so true. I love that they picked a Black actor to lead this cast. I love how he leads it so compellingly. It is fantastic, and I love how they adapted these, this classic story, this very old book into a really modern way. I mean, there's a scene where he's ordering food, for sort of like a DoorDash, Uber Eats kind of delivery, and that's one of his mechanisms for getting away. And it's so cool. It's so fun. It's so fabulous.
It feels very 21st century, and
it's
completely a tribute to the original. Excuse me. And what's fun is one of the detectives in there gets it. He realizes that what's happening is there's somebody trying to imitate Arsène Lupin. And he's a household name in France, but that doesn't mean that everyone's read the stories. Sherlock Holmes is a household name in the US, but that doesn't mean people really know the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. And so this detective goes, well, this is Arsène Lupin. And then our character, ARSÈNE, Omar Sy's character, then begins to imitate more and more some aspects of the original stories, and even uses anagrams of the name Arsène Lupin, such as Paul Cernin, in the various crimes. And this cop, everybody's thinking the cop is crazy.
He's crazy.
Yes. And he's the one who gets it. And so I'm very curious to see what they do with him in season 2.
Exactly. And I love how that one cop is, he's like, no, guys, this is what he's doing. And everyone's like, okay, go sit in the corner and take a nap. Here's some chamomile tea. We're going to soothe you down. Karen saying they've been watching it and they really like it. Karen, me too. And again, it's so great to see how this very old classic story is being adapted in this fresh, modern, new way. I love that they, have a Black man leading the class. This is absolutely fantastic. Now, Michael, this is not your first time working with books that take place in another era. And I'm going to turn it over here to my co-host, Margaret, because she just finished reading another of your anthologies, Women in Victorian Crime. Margaret, take over. Grill them up good. Let's get the skinny on that.
Yes, it was a happy coincidence that I looked up what Sarah was doing next, because I'm always interested in seeing what brilliant author she's bringing on. I thought, wait a minute, the name sounds familiar. And only like a few weeks ago I had read this and really loved all the stories. I'm a historical fiction writer, and so I'm more interested in like the older Victorian era, and so that's where I spend all my research time. So this was fabulous. It's very different reading than the crime fiction we have today. So I love to set up the notes. Yeah. What was your experience diving in and sort of trawling through women detectives and different expectations?
One of the things that was really interesting was pointed out to me by on Morning Edition, Renee Montaigne, when I first did that book, The Victorian Women in Crime. She was interviewing me and she said, why is it, as a lifelong detective fiction fan, I don't know these stories? Why don't I know these female detectives already? And so I said, well, as I look back at it, they were gradually in the 20th century, a series of male editors sidelined them. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not suggesting that they all had the same hat and the same motto or anything in doing this, but it was the era in which some of these very smart, powerful, independent, not powerful in the worldly sense, but strong-willed and smart and resourceful women, a number of them young, some of them retirement age, working as detectives, were gradually replaced by the safer characters, the ones that were a little easier, I think, for Edwardian or World War II era male sensibilities, such as Miss Marple. Mm-hmm. A nosy old village busybody fits better than into the 20th century anthologies, it seems to me, than do some of these characters, Loveday Brooke and so many of the wonderful characters from the era who are hired to be. One of them is a police detective decades before any detective department actually hired a woman.
In reality, yeah.
So in that sense, it's science fiction.
Science fiction, detective fiction. Yeah, that's great. One of the things I noticed that I was very interested in was that, as you say, before and after, they tended to group them into the safe corners, like Miss Marple. But what I was reading in these stories is that even then, in the Victorian age, when it was science fiction and it was just so new and fascinating, the woman acting as a detective had to balance the sort of masculine armor that she put on as a detective with her own character. And most of the stories were set up in a way that she had to do this for money to take care of her family, and she was,
Yes.
Hounded into the profession by needs of women and children everywhere. And
she becomes a detective because her husband
took over and worked for the husband.
Yes, because he went blind or something. I mean, it was outrageous excuse. And then Violet Strange, a wonderful character who's a New York socialite, and she's in a lot of different stories in a wonderful series. And some of them are quite clever, Columbo-style detective work. And she's completely off in her own universe, and she then gets replaced too. She's too strong, too independent. But she had the same thing. She had to have an excuse that she had a sister who was in an asylum or something. Yeah. And that you can't just be a woman wanting to do this or who gets into it and discovers she's good at it. And in an era when there were 1,000 things that a woman might find frustrating in a more licit profession, it makes sense that, especially in the role of women in a lot of these stories where being female alone made them somewhat invisible. And there are some cases, or they could easily be disguised as a maid or a teacher, a governess, all those things.
Just like Arsène Lupin being invisible because he's at the bottom of the pyramid. I just chimed in on the Diamond Necklace episode last night when I discovered this was happening. And so I watched that and was like, the invisibility, the intimate listening that is possible.
Oh, yes.
It's just so good.
I love that.
It's great. It's great.
And he's not only a young black man, which socially in that environment is invisible, then he is a janitor in a jumpsuit. And so he's just completely, in terms of the Louvre, where this is taking place, which is wonderful, he can just walk through the wall practically. They couldn't conceive that he is relevant to the diamonds or something on display. It's wonderful. And so that social awareness is stronger in the series than in the original ones 115 years ago.
I think that speaks to what our audiences want today as well, because it's all about the critique and the give and take between the classes and awareness. And definitely.
And the show is also raising, issues like discrimination against immigrants, class, race, social discrimination against immigrants, against people of color. How people of color are often wrongfully, horrifically railroaded into false confessions, into false imprisonment. And so I really appreciate that the show is also dealing with these very real issues, and as well as the invisibility. We're getting lots of hearts up on Facebook. Thanks for bringing that up.
Well, one more thing: if Ludivine Sagnier, who plays his girlfriend, his ex-wife, I think she is, or disaffected wife, they need to give her more to do, because in the social issues stuff, one of the things that's not happening is women getting much attention in the series, as they do somewhat behind the scenes and producers and things like that for it, I've seen. But one was the one older woman who's a very powerful journalist doesn't stay around long. Again, I don't want to do spoilers, but she's not there for long.
Okay. All right.
It's a shame. It just is a shame.
Yeah. I had another question about sort of comparing these. So when we think about detective fiction, the Sherlock, persona is in all of our heads because of all the adaptations, because of all the stories, because of the popularity, and just like the way that it's in every home and on every tongue. So how would you say we're finally coming to Arsène Lupin in this American series? How is this a cultural difference maybe that he hasn't gotten as much play, or what do you think is at work there?
I think thieves in general have had to have, in the way that female detectives had to have an excuse for being a female detective. Thieves for a very long time have, and understandably, are not something we're all going to go, yeah, that's the way to do it. But
Robin Hood, I mean,
yeah, yes, and Arsène Lupin has a definite Robin Hood aspect to him, which I like a lot. And again, that in itself, Robin Hood himself was a social critique kind of character.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not the same you'd see with, you know, Jack the Ripper or something. I mean, he was just, Robin Hood was, gives you the possibility of very likable, and you become a folk hero. And Arsène Lupin does that. And in later collections of the short stories, he becomes that, because he becomes in the world of Arsène Lupin, in the fictional world of those 5 volumes of short stories and the novels, he becomes very, very famous. In part because he gives away some of his money, and because he's outwitting the Sheriff of Nottingham every time he turns around. So, you know, we're all, I mean, think, and Colonel Clay was another character who was in that era. He was in a book called An African Millionaire, which has also been re-released by Penguin. I do not work for Penguin. I'm just saying they're just great.
Great recommendations.
But they're ahead of the game, and so they re-released An African Millionaire, and it's a wonderful series. It's a lot like this. It's a critique of capitalism, at the same time that it's some of the best con artist stories ever written.
Ooh.
And the guy keeps conning the same millionaire.
What?
Yeah. And that's what's great about it, is the man's arrogance, the man's dare we say Trumpian confidence in himself,
yes.
fools him. He stumbles again and again, and some of that happens in Lupin. That it's always been, if you read about the history of actual con artists, their big top game has always been to get someone, someone set up to con them. That the best con is always somebody trying to con you, and you undermine it all the way from the beginning. And Lupin is very good at that too. And there's a wonderful one that in the short stories, in the original story collections, Arsène Lupin in prison is an episode of the series, and it's very good and funny and smart. But the original is even smarter and even funnier, the short story.
Oh.
They're so ingenious. It's hard to talk about any of it without just doing little fireworks of spoilers in every direction.
The surprise of the so the narrator in the first episode that I watched at the Netflix series says at the end, as a wrap up, he's always one step ahead. And that's, of course, I think one of the conceits of the character is that you don't even realize what's going on, and they don't show you until after the fact all the preparation that he did, and you're like, oh, this is so brilliant, you know? It's like the hype.
I love that.
To watch. Mm-hmm.
He makes the cops then become characters in the little play he's putting on, and they don't know it, and he cons them. He lures them in all kinds of different ways. He has whole elaborate ways of getting the cops over here to think they're maybe zooming in on him, or to think they're doing something else entirely, but they're really they've just been hired to play in his little movie. Yeah. And it's very, very clever. And also it makes me think a lot about how narrative works. That the staple of serious literature nowadays of the unreliable narrator. And these are unreliable narrators, unreliable characters, unreliable everything. And so you have to take, like in a good detective story, you tell yourself provisional conclusions all the way through of what you think might be happening. And then at the end, you get that weird aesthetic thrill of going back and re-envisioning it all in place. And I think for a crime story to do that is unusual. There usually seems like more straightforward. So I just call these caper stories, but they're con artists, burglars, all of these Lupin types, Colonel Clay, Raffles. the famous British con artist and burglar.
Okay, that makes me think of the hotel in Singapore, but it's not related. Right?
There is a Raffles Hotel, and actually they're just opening one in Boston. Apparently it's I thought it was a weird name for a hotel, but that's apparently a very, very fancy high-end hotel, the Raffles Hotel Collection.
Embarrassed to see the cluelessness on my face. I don't know. I have no idea. I love the idea that, and these things happen in the real world, that a hotel in Singapore would name itself after an imaginary British thief.
I think it's the other way around. I think it's something to do with the colonialism and the
there was also Stamford Raffles was a British colonial remember the British government in Indian and other colonies early in the 19th century, and he was a founder of the what's the zoo called? Just the London Zoo now. I forget what the Zoological Gardens in London. He was a founder of that. And I think he actually was in Singapore for a while. Okay. So actually,
a common inspiration for
the
East India Company activity in Asia and the detective.
I think we just figured out between the three of us, we know everything. I know that's going to really invite a lot of obnoxious remarks, I'm sure.
Ooh, a good question coming in from Anissa. She would like to know, Michael, who is your favorite detective that you have researched so far, and what was so interesting about this person?
Among the ones I've written about, the first one who comes to mind is, I mentioned this name, it's an unfortunate name, really, Loveday Brooke, which sounds like, at the very least, singing telegrams, or prefer telegrams. But she was created by C.L. Purkis, Catherine Louisa Purkis, who wrote under the disguising initials of C.L. And she wound up later a founder of the British version of the SPCA, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. She was a founder of that and became very important in that. But she also wrote the first series of detective stories about a young woman who is hired to work. She's not, her husband is not blind. Her sister is not in an asylum. She decides to get a job as a detective, and she works as a detective for a detective agency. The first one. I mean, she's the heir of V.I. Warshawski. I mean, she's a fabulous character. And so I would say she would be first.
Ooh,
we have one of her. Feel free to write to Penguin in the next 5 minutes and tell them I should do an anthology of her. I have one of her in the Penguin book of Victorian Women in Crime.
Yes, it's solving the mystery of a threat sent by mail with daggers on it, and whether it's the real thing or it's a complete fabrication from somebody. That was a good one. Yeah, excellent.
Ooh, very cool. Michael's active on Twitter. Go hang out with him there. He's Michael Sims' book. Thank you for that. Oh, Christina is saying top community member there. Hey, Christina, welcome back. She said, thank you for adding to my TBR, Michael. I love it. You come here and just add so many great books.
My TBR has gotten out of hand because I have an entire long, tall bookcase within reach of the bed. So I thought I'd put some favorites there, and then I gradually would go to a book sale, and I would on and on and on. And now I've got within arm's reach, literally, when I lie down at night, 100 things, 40 of which are in progress.
Oh, boy.
I'll bet it's 40 that I'm claiming to be reading. It's ridiculous.
That's a method. It's called read a chapter, and you figure out which book you're going to read by reading a chapter and then choosing whichever one appeals most to you. But then you're a chapter in, and you got to keep a bookmark there. Is that what you mean? Because otherwise, how do you keep 40 books straight?
Well, I like your description. Let's go with that. It sounds so systematic and ambitious instead of wandering in a fog. I'm actually somebody who I do the same thing I did when I was 7 years old. I search around the entire apartment. We have 5,000 books, and I pick out 6 or 7 of them that I know might be the flavor I'm looking for, like a chef going through the cupboard, and I think this is not quite the flavor. And I'll lie down in bed with 7 books, and I, go to sleep 20 minutes later with, I've read 10 pages in one, and then I switch to some ambitious thing about physics or whatever, all the many things I don't know, and I wind up switching and reading another Perry Mason, and and I go to sleep with 6 other books on my chest. It's ridiculous.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
So you have 5,000 books, and you're reading 40. Who are you, Michael Sims? Who are you?
I know it's sad. A friend of mine said that my son was going to be pathologically nerdy, and he's 8 and he has autism. So how pathological can it be so far? But I just thought, I remember saying, well, it's worked out pretty well for me. I mean, it might be okay for him too.
There you go.
So what are you reading right now? What flavor? Anissa is saying, what she said is 5,000 a lot of books, asking for a friend. Wink.
No, it's good. It's like seed money. It's a good beginning for a serious library.
Anissa, we knew we liked you. We knew we liked you. So Michael, what flavor are you in the mood for? What you reading right now?
I'm reading, of course, I'll immediately forget titles. I'm reading a wonderful, I'm very interested in urban natural history. I want to really know the background on the squirrels and the woodchucks. And we live in a small town in Western Pennsylvania, and we're on the top floor of an apartment house that's right in the edge of the woods. So I'm surrounded by fun animals, and I just want to know more about them. And so I'm reading another one of those. I'm reading Darwin and Women. It's an anthology of letters from the Darwin Correspondence Project. A woman has gathered all of the major letters that are of significance between him and women, and looking at how his attitudes over time didn't reflect in his writing later in his books the level of intelligent women he had been dealing with for his entire damn life, and he forgot. I mean, he wrote about women were distinctly intellectually inferior, and this book, Darwin and Women, for example, is the easiest, quickest reminder that he dropped the ball. And someone, even late in his life, a woman gave him the chance. She said to him, do I correctly understand, I've read your new book, do I correctly understand that you feel that women are intellectually inferior? And I thought, irony, anyone? How did Charles Darwin not get the irony? He would go, oh, well, here's a chance to save it. And instead, he said, well, yes, I do feel that in general that women are intellectually inferior, although morally superior. The Victorian escape.
Yeah. So she lobbed a softball right down the middle. She was like, okay, I'm going to wind it up for you. Here's your chance to save yourself. And he said, no, I'm going to double down. Yes, ma'am. Yes. You are inferior. Sit.
Yes. And she had just demonstrated that she had read the book.
And understood it despite her intellectual inferiority.
Yes. I'm sure her dad helped. I mean, it's just insane. I'm sorry. So I'm always reading about Darwin. I'm reading a lot of, I'm always reading the history of natural history in one way or another. I'm reading historical fiction set in the early 19th century. Yes, you write historical fiction, right?
Yeah, I only go as far back as the 1820s, so I'm not sure which one you're.
That's exactly what I'm reading a lot about right now.
Excellent.
And also, I'm working on a book about the young Darwin, and it opens in 1836. So I really need to know. I need to feel the era, and Darwin's someone I've always found very interesting. So I'm attempting. I haven't pitched this to an agent yet. Not attempting. I mean, I've done enough books to know I'm going to do this. I'm looking at the women in again, this is what made this book come to mind, the anthology about Darwin and women. I'm looking at the contributions of the wives of the three main scientists who worked with Darwin, and they were the artists. It was standard at the time that you were a geologist, so you'll marry a woman who's the daughter of a geologist. She knows a lot, and she can help you, and you don't have to pay her, and you don't have to give her credit.
The best kind.
I was just reading.
Yeah. So
actually,
I'm sorry.
Don't learn existence. Oh, sorry, I had a little lag. I was just reading about how you don't learn about those women's existence because they don't register as apprentices because they learn in their father's house. And so you have the non-existence of them in the historical record. And you're like, no, they were there. They're part of history.
And John Gould, a famous bird artist who was the person who told Darwin these birds from the Galapagos were finches, his wife was the primary artist. And so anyway, we went far afield. I tend to do that. I'm sorry.
Oh, this is a lovely comment from Christina, again, top community member. She said her son is the same way, Michael, and that reading helps to ease him. He's 9, so sounds about the same age as your son. That's really cool.
Yeah, reading. I was reading to him, well, before he was born, really, and so it's always been something important. And now, my partner, May, is the person he chooses to read to him at night. He wants me to sit there, but he wants her to read. And I'm thinking, what? Am I not animated? Am I not? I admit all my animal voices sound like the same character. What does he want?
Your Yelp review is just going down he just keeps revising you downward. You're probably down to 1 star or something.
Yes, it's very sad. But he adores her, and I am supposed to be present, but I'm not the one usually asked to read nowadays. So anyway, yes. So good luck with your son.
Oh, yay. Thanks, Christina, for sharing. All right, we have just 1 minute left. So any final questions for Michael? Get them going in the comments. What about you, Margaret? Any last questions for Michael here?
Oh, well, you know, the magic of balancing all these different research things is one of the mysteries that I want to find out. But actually, I had a question about Maurice Leblanc and whether you discovered any fascinating tidbits about the author of ARSÈNE Lupin that you can relate to us that influenced his detective character.
I think that's a wonderful question, because for me, the most memorable thing about Leblanc, well, there were two. One is visual, in that he built a shed that had only 3 sides, and he would work in it in all kinds of weather. So snow would blow in, he would have a big robe around him, he'd have a coat on and a cap and earmuffs, and he's sitting out there writing. He said it kept him awake. But the other is that he was talking about all the different ways that inspiration work, and he said that when he was asked to create a character during the period in which Arthur Conan Doyle was not writing about Sherlock Holmes, the period between Conan Doyle deciding I'm sick of Holmes, I'm going to push him over this cliff, and the period in which he decided I missed the money. So during that time, the guy came to Leblanc, the editor, and said, give me something. And he said he sat down without a single thought in his mind, and ARSÈNE Lupin walked across the page.
What?
I love that image.
Origin story. I love
that. I'm sure it's slightly tidied up from reality, but I don't care. It's wonderful.
Right. We'll take the distillation. We'll take the distillation of reality. That's okay. Yeah. That's fantastic.
Well, Michael, this has been such a fun, fabulous time. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us, chatting about all of your amazing writing. Thank you to my co-host and partner in crime, pun intended, Margaret Pinard, my fellow author, fellow blazer, and friend. This has been such a fabulous, fun, and far-ranging conversation. Michael's latest work, again, his most recent nonfiction book is Arthur and Sherlock, Conan Doyle and the Creation of Holmes. Again, a finalist for almost every single award in crime nonfiction in English, from the Edgar to the Silver Dagger, everything in between. Michael Sims, you are amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your wit, wisdom, and insight. And please come back and talk to us next time when your next book is out.
Thank you very much. This has been great fun. You two are fabulous hosts. Thank you so much.
Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you at 4 o'clock with JT Ellison. See you soon.